I'm not a huge believer in motivation. Motivation comes and goes. It's unreliable. It's not somebody like you can hang out with motivation. You can have a drink with motivation. Are you doing what you can to push the boundaries, to push the organization towards a better future?
You are listening to The Experience Edge.
My guest today is Marc, the host of the Service Design Show. It has been running for 9 years already. Astonishing. Over 500 episodes and counting. He has a thriving, curated service design community, which he calls The Circle. So I'm sure we're going to dig into that today. But before becoming a public figure, Marc was running a service design agency himself, helped a ton of clients improve the way they design services. But most importantly, Marc is a great human being. So Marc, welcome to the pod.
Thanks, Jochem. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited that we can have this chat. And I want to start in a bit of an unusual place today because you're a very familiar figure in the service design community. But I also know that doing the research for preparation of this call, you were the first person ever to Google service design in the Netherlands, found 0 results on Google. And maybe please fact check me if that's right. But the reason I'm bringing this up is not because that was interesting, but something else about you I found was that it seems you kind of invented the QR code. I don't know if that's true, but I would love to dig in there, see how your mind works, and maybe you can tell me, is that right? Is that a fair assessment? Or what is the story about you and QR codes?
Okay, so let's set a few things straight. I'm not sure if I was the first one Googling service design Netherlands, but I was definitely a person Googling that term and coming to the conclusion that Google at that time, when I got interested in it, showed 0 results. So that's nowadays a harder challenge to try to actually Google something and get 0 results. That's quite an interesting challenge, but that is true. The story around QR codes is actually quite funny. I don't know how I stumbled upon them, but I have a software engineering degree originally, so I'm a programmer engineer by trade. And one of the first things that I started doing after graduating was thinking about, let's see if you still know this term, location-based services. That was the hype back then. And you have to imagine this was before the iPhone, around 2004, 2005. So we had those PDAs, like those geeky devices. And one of the things that we were thinking about is how do you connect those devices to the physical world around us? And barcodes just seemed such an obvious way to do it. But at that time, nobody in the Netherlands, again, was thinking about this. So I started looking around. I don't know how I stumbled upon QR codes, but we started using and bringing QR codes to the work we did. Eventually, I had the domain name qrcodes.nl. It was fun. I had a group on flickr.com. I don't know if you still know that, the photo site that started to collect QR codes in the wild. I think it was called QR codes in the wild. And I got people from Japan asking me, what are you doing? You're collecting QR codes. And I was like, yeah, but this is interesting. So yeah, QR codes, that was definitely part of my history.
That's amazing. I can imagine if we pull up the site in the show notes, QR codes. It'll be a very useful place for people to look at. If you take a picture of a QR code today, you can't even do that, right? It just immediately prompts you to the server on the website. So what does that tell about how you think as an engineer becoming a service design professional? Because that's a big shift. I mean, you want to make stuff, but you also want to make stuff that is working for people. How does that translate to the Marc you are today?
I think the gap wasn't, or the transition into design wasn't all that big for me. So yeah, engineer. But what I learned in my engineering degree is basically a systematic way to solve problems. We already use a lot of visual thinking. We already used a lot of questioning. The thing that I needed to do, and somehow I think succeeded fairly well, is to let go of one specific material to create your solutions. And the material in my case was code. And start thinking what are other materials that could be useful in the solution that we are looking for to solve the challenge that we're looking for. So I think the mindset of an engineer, or the training or the craft of an engineer, going to design doesn't have to be a huge leap. So yeah, that's my take on it.
And now you're not a service designer anymore. You run a community. You build a circle. You have a pretty known name in the service design space in general. You're a big proponent of journey management, and you're at the forefront of many of these conversations right now. But maybe like for folks listening, can you just explain what the circle is, what your ambitions are before we dig in? Because I have a few follow-up questions on this, and I'm really curious about your 15 years of experience setting this up, becoming a service designer, running the community. But for folks listening who don't know, what is the circle? And we can start there, and I'll jump off with you from that point.
So in the most simple form, the circle is a tribe of in-house service design professionals who get together on a regular basis to learn from each other, learn from each other's stories. It's a safe space. It's a space where people get challenged. It's a place where people get support. And it's small, it's intimate, and that's the way we want it to be.
How are you thinking about the worst bits of running a community? Because designing it and then setting it up must be fun. I can imagine that also there's a lot of fun in running that. But like, what is the worst part of it all for you?
The worst part. The conversation that I've had with myself often recently is like, what if money wasn't an issue? Right? No issue at all. What would you be doing? And for me, community is the answer. So this is at the moment in my life, the thing that I would be doing no matter what. I don't know if I experience this as the worst things, but the most challenging things have to do with people. And you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner. So you also know like when you have to let go of people, you have to sort of confront people on their behavior or it's not fitting with culture. Those are the elements that I enjoy the least.
Are you solving for them personally? Are you hiring people for you to help you with that? Or are you facing your challenges head on? And maybe you could give an example of like a discussion around this that you had to have yourself that was painful. That might be interesting to learn from.
So right now I'm not hiring anyone to take on this specific role. There are definitely people in my team who take on other parts of running the community, but I feel that this is actually what I'm paid for by the community, to have these difficult conversations and to make sure that the right, quote unquote, right people are in. So a practical example is I recently had a conversation with someone who wanted to join the community, and I always do a discovery call to sort of get a feeling whether or not it's a mutual fit. And in that conversation, I don't know, like pretty quickly I had the feeling, okay, this isn't going to work for various reasons, personality, background, and then after the call, I have to listen to my gut telling me, Marc, you have to be very open and honest right now and tell this person that they're not welcome in the community, that this isn't a good fit and it's better for them to look somewhere else.
I find it sometimes that we make it so hard on ourselves and thinking through these harder conversations, and then when we do it, it's actually fine and mutually beneficial.
So what helps me a lot is realizing that, one, like you say, it's not about me. At the same time, I mean, the rest of the members of the community is trusting me to make sure that the right people are in. So if I don't take up that responsibility, and I take that responsibility very serious, I'm letting them down. So I'd rather go through the pain of having this challenging conversation right now and sort of continue having the trust of the rest of the members than shying away from this conversation and then degrading the quality of the community. In the end, it's a very easy trade-off. I just need to get over myself.
How are you helping that community with the criteria that you do? Because you mentioned it was a very gut feel decision and you're very in tune with your community. But as you have like brands from everywhere in the world, from IKEA to Airbnb, people participating in your community, how do you align that with the values you have? But maybe also, what are the characteristics of a good member? Like, how do you define that?
Sure. We actually do a lot of research around that. And when I ask my members regularly, what do you think makes a good member? And things that come up is generosity, honesty, people who have lived experiences, who have stories to share. We're mostly looking for people who are willing to give more than they take.
Is that a reason why you're not bringing in people from agencies and only focus on in-house services, or is there a big choice around how you're doing that?
Yes, you're correct. The circle is exclusive to in-house service design professionals. There is a great book by Priya Parker on the art of gathering, the art of hosting. I have the book here. And she says that it's just as important who's not at the party as who is. And for us, keeping it to in-house has a few benefits. One is you don't have to worry that you're going to be sold to the next day. So in the community, we want people to actually share struggles and challenges and be open, because that's where the interesting stories come from. And when you're sort of holding back on the story because you're worried that the next day an agency will be calling you and pitching you to help solve this problem, we just don't want to even get remotely close to that situation. And the other thing is, like, when you're hanging out with people who share the same context, you just have to do less preparation. People just get your situation, right? So it's easier to go deeper into specific topics.
I want to switch gears to service design at large as a practice, as a field, because when I was digging in and preparing for our conversation, it's pretty clear that there are almost two tracks within the community, and you have to tell me if that's right. Now, on one end, I see deep philosophical, human-centric, planetary-centric streams of work emerge. And on the other hand, I see the commercialization of service design, meaning service design is impacting the business, is typically helping commercial businesses realize a better service for their end customers, but it's better connected. It's almost like there's two streams in service design where part of it is very philosophical, the other part is very commercial. And maybe in the context of setting the stage, every year you run a salary report, which is basically like a huge data set of service design professionals, and it gives a state of the union. I know your current one is coming out soon. By the time we are recording, it's in progress. So what can you say about the changes that you're seeing in the way service design is being practiced, and especially the difference between how commercial organizations versus human-centric or planetary-centric streams of service design happen at the same time?
Okay, let's think about how to approach this question. So yes, the salary report, which this year will be the salary plus report, because salary is becoming less and less of a important element in the report. We are going broader and more nuanced. So I'm really excited to see what's going to come up. The observation that you make that there are two streams of service design, a commercial one and a philosophical one, maybe I would describe the second one as a more purpose-driven one. I recognize that as well. I think there are people who are questioning the way we work and what our standards are when it comes to ethics, when it comes to morals, when it comes to who is designing. There are very important voices raising concerns and sort of challenging us to raise the bar. And at the same time, we're seeing service design being adopted and incorporated, or the service design mindset and attitude, approach, tools, frameworks being adopted to actually make businesses more humanity-centered.
What about the role itself? You've shared sometimes publicly that there are many service designers that don't have a service design role. They're in business, they're in strategy, they're in operations, but they are service designers. Is that a concerning trend, or is that a trend? How are you thinking about that? Is that still a thing, or is service design as a practice becoming more standardized, and therefore this is actually going down? Like how is that evolving?
So if you purely look at the data, the salary report has been going for 4 years right now, and one of the questions is, tell us what your job title is. The number of people, the percentage of participants in the salary report who have service design in their job title has been declining year over year. Not by huge percentages, but it is declining. I think that's a good thing. That's my perspective. I know that there are people out there who are celebrating that we finally have some acceptance around service design and that people are recognizing the term. I actually think we need, and I've stated this publicly on many occasions before, I think we need to move on beyond the title of a service designer. So I think it's good that that title is actually declining.
How would you define service design then?
Oh, you want to do an episode on definitions, Jochem?
No, just one. I think just one is fine. But it's important. I think also the notion of what service design does for a business is not produce a journey map or produce a service blueprint. It's about impacting the customer experience. It's about creating sustainable business growth. It is about creating happy customers that love your brand. It's so much more than just designing the service, or at least like designing the process to design the service. So a definition could help because you are one of the fathers of service design. So how would you define it?
Jochem, I'll go back to the story that I've shared, I think, in my very first year entering service design, figuring this stuff out as well. And that story is, I think, still relevant. So it's not a definition, but it's a story, and you probably know this already. So when you have two companies creating journey management software, and they are doing that at the same price and with the same features, service design is going to be the thing that makes your customers, your users pick you, refer you to their friends and colleagues, and keep on coming back over your competitors. And in this case, I use journey management, but you can insert a coffee shop example there and you'll go back to the classic. Service design, for me, it's a competitive differentiator. It's a way to align businesses with the needs of people. Not just customers, but the needs of people and staying relevant.
And we circle back to the other point you made earlier about questioning the way we work, raise the bar as a service design community. What do you mean with that?
And there are people who are way more qualified to talk about this. And I would absolutely recommend people to check out some of the episodes on the Service Design Show. We have to think about the potential harm that we're doing with the solutions that we are putting in the world. For who are we not designing? Which questions aren't we asking in our design process? Are we actually putting solutions into the world that are going to stand the test of time, or are we going to just create another landfill? In this case, not with products, but with services. I think there are still a lot of areas that haven't been explored within service design, and we should do that as soon as possible. Otherwise, just take a look at industrial design and product design and where that has left us today.
How do you think about the balance between short-term commercial gains from a good service that might be ending up on a landfill, a service landfill, as you call it, over time, that might be a good idea now for the business, might be great for the customer or the human that you're designing for, but on the long term might actually be bad. How do you think about this? Do you have examples of some of those friction cases where it's really hard to make a good judgment call? Or is there any advice you give to your community on how to navigate this?
Design is always about trade-offs, right? I think that's what makes our field so interesting. Sure, you have to make trade-offs when you're thinking about staying in business and being profitable and making sure that you're here next year as well. The question we have as professionals, and we need to ask this to ourselves, is this aligning with my beliefs, with my values, with the way I want to see the world, right? If it's not, then either you need to find a different job, and that's easier said than done. At least you should sort of raise concerns and advocate for a better solution, right? For a better future, for an alternative future. I don't know if that directly answers your question, but I think it's not like talking about the business or the organization is very abstract. I think you need to make it personal. Like, what kind of world do you want to live in 10 years?
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Experience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. Do you want more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access? Check out the Experience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Now let's get back to the conversation.
How do service designers struggle or not struggle? How do they take on this challenge? Because it seems like picking a company to work for is one thing that you believe that you align with in this realm. But then on the other hand, business impact is not necessarily the number one focus for a service designer. And understanding the difference can sometimes be hard, that you're forced to do things that you don't want to do, that you're involved in projects that you don't believe in. It's easier said than done, right? If you're a free-spirited service designer, that's great. But if you're in-house and you're working for a company like McDonald's, you can imagine that there are some constraints that you have to deal with whether you like it or not.
So constraints are great, right? Again, that's what makes our work interesting. Within those constraints, the question is, are you doing what you can to push the boundaries, to push the organization towards a better future? And that doesn't mean you're going to change it overnight. It doesn't even mean that you will change it at all. I recently had a conversation on the show where we said that service design has become very sterile. The design professional has almost become transparent, like the objective person. I don't think that's the way we should be going. I think we need to add personality and subjectivity and opinions to the work we do.
So just so I understand, sterile, what do you mean with sterile?
Not opinionated. Like I hear a lot of professionals, and I've been there as well for a very long time. Like you're there to do research, uncover insights, almost without adding any judgment or bias, which is of course not possible. You're trying to translate that into solutions. Solutions where you can say, okay, this is like a direct reflection of the needs and pains and desires of our user group. And I, as an individual, don't have any influence or bias in this solution. Like that's what I mean with sterile.
And that's a bad thing, actually.
I would argue that it's better, that it's a bad thing. Yeah.
How would you advise your younger self, like if you would be back in your service design shoes, running your agency? How would you make it fun and opinionated again? Because I think that is a very good point that you're bringing. And I see a lot of teams in experience design that are being scared to do this. It's rather like we use the process and we're following the process, and here's the bunch of solutions that we came up for the customers, and then you either get to build them or not, and then you go back to square one. But it's really lacking innovation, or it's lacking that spiciness that you can bring. So I'm curious, like if you would go back in time, young Marc running his agency, how would you do things differently?
I would say two things to myself. Grab a journal, start writing every day about what you enjoy in the world and what you don't, what you're grateful for, and walk for at least 30 minutes in nature. That would be my advice.
Why would that help? How are you thinking that would help? I have assumptions, but like, why do you think that is important?
One, because I know it works as I've done it later in my life. It helps we need to have conversations with ourselves about what we value, what's important to us, and we need to know why that is important to us. Only if we have had those conversations, we can bring that to our work. So it's really hard to be opinionated if you are not grounded in the things that you find important. Then everything is okay, and everything is important. Like, I don't know, taking the time to ask yourself important, sometimes tough questions, and to marinate upon them, to take the time to revise them, is going to give you insights that your work and everybody around you will benefit from.
Do you think service design professionals in large organizations that work in-house can benefit from this directly? Because a lot of them want to make a big impact, but are serving teams that are limited and don't have that impact. How do you think that this helps them?
If anything, it's going to ground you, and it's going to give you a sense of calmness. Because in a huge organization, there is so much pressure. There are timelines, there are deadlines, there are reorgs. You're ambitious. Like, that's one of the issues with service design professionals. They're ambitious. They want to do stuff. And you run into these challenges. It's very, very easy to burn out and sort of run into your own limitations if you don't take care of your mental well-being. So how does this help? It helps you to slow down. It helps you to gauge the situation and to think about what's really important.
Have you been in the circle addressing these topics? Because I can imagine burnout is not just a service design issue. It is more of a systemic issue that we hear more and more of these days. Like, what are the topics that you discuss with your community around this, and what are some of the ways that you're solving for them?
This is absolutely one of the topics that keeps coming back. We literally had sessions on identifying burnout. Like, what is the language? You've spoken to many service design professionals before, and you also know that a lot of people come from different backgrounds. So it's just a handful of people who sort of have a traditional service design education. I've talked to people who were cooks, who were aviation people, but also like qualified psychologists. That's one of the people in our community, and he knows everything about burnout. So he mixes service design and that psychology part. And we talked about it, like, what is the language around burnout? And how do we solve for that is by putting the topic on the table and saying, this is relevant. This is what's happening right now. And even if it's not happening to you today, or you're not experiencing it today, who knows, maybe in 6 months. So we're preparing people. We're sort of building their resilience. We're building their capability.
What is the other topic that is currently very top of mind in the community?
There are topics that keep coming back every year. So we've been running the community for close to 3.5 years. There are always topics around influence. How do you gain influence in your organization? How do you actually get people to, quote unquote, do what you say, to listen to you? We always have conversations around careers. What's next? How do you progress? How do you grow? There are topics around, let me think, what was change. Like, how do you quote unquote motivate, or how do you drive change? The list goes on and on. I think by now we're close to 150 sessions, I think. So a bunch of topics, but there are definitely patterns.
Let's unpack influence a little bit if we can. I'm always curious about this because organizations that have an edge on their customer experience, the brands that are known for superior customer experience, delightful customer experience, they're also the brands that have a lot of service designers in-house. So there is a correlation. I wouldn't say it's a causation, but influence is a big spicy topic. A lot of service designers can have it, want to have it, are not asked to have it, might have it, but are not sure if they can get it. Walk me through, like, what are some of the things that you are seeing in how service designers are actually getting influence in the organization?
It's a huge topic. And I wish there was a simple solution. Things that I've been hearing and seeing from people who feel that they are succeeding at influencing the organization, a few things come up each and every time. They approach influencing as almost a form of gardening. In order to have influence in your organization or on the people around you, it's not a one-time thing where you show up for a presentation and hope that somebody will listen to you and take you up. It's a matter of building trust, building relationships, building credibility, being curious about the people around you. It's an ongoing process. So influence, instead of it being a noun, I think it's much more interesting to talk about it as a verb, right? How do you do influence? How do you continue to grow and develop and nurture influence? So again, the people in the circle who are on the right track figuring this out, they are actively cultivating influence. They see it as part of their job, their role, their responsibility. And how? By having conversations with people around them on an ongoing basis when it's not needed, when you don't have to present.
So they're becoming service design politicians in a way.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I remember when UX had this like maturity problem, right? Everyone was just thinking about design being like at the end of the delivery process, and then all of a sudden UX became a thing, and we wanted to get more influence. I mean, I'm a UX designer by training. I used to do this a lot in my early days of my career, and then we would try actively to get influence in the organization, right? By proactively designing things, linking it to the business. But it was also a lot of political conversations and building relationships across different teams. And are we seeing the same thing with service design? And is that a good thing, actually?
That's a tough question. Is it a good thing? I think it's fair to say that it's not for everyone. If that is what gives you fulfillment, stay away from these things around influence and politics. But if you are sort of, and I think if you're interested, if you're curious, like it's just another design challenge. Like if you're interested in how do we move this organization, how do we move this team to a different place, to a better place, and you approach it from a place of curiosity, there are people out there who actually enjoy that process. So I don't know if it's good or bad. It just is.
Do you think there's a lot of stigma around the career trajectory that what you mentioned is like if you hone the craft and you love the craft, it's great to stay honing the craft, but there might be that a lot of service designers are thinking about stepping up in the organization. It's also a way to gain influence, but then there's not like a clear path towards like service design director, which we see, but then there's no VP of service design. There's no chief service design officer. Like those roles don't exist. So becoming a leader or first a manager or first line manager, then becoming a leader is a completely different path that service designers can take. But it doesn't mean that you're still taking service design as a practice. Do you think it's in service design a bad thing to stay on the individual contributing track too long?
If everybody would have the ambition to become a VP, then I think we would have a serious issue. So I'm very happy that we have individual contributors, and we need more of them. There aren't enough service design professionals to design the services that we have, to improve them. So we need more individual contributors. I don't know if I fully agree with your observation that when you move up the ladder in the organization, that you move away. It's not the word that you use, but move away from design. If my memory serves me well, it was either Doug Powell or Todd Wilkins on the Service Design Show who were discussing, they quote unquote made it. They were at the top of the organizations. Doug Powell was at IBM. Looking back at their sort of career, they said one of the things that we wish we would have done more is to stay and keep and bring the design spirit into leadership roles, right? It's very easy to quote unquote put on the suit and sort of start behaving people with an MBA and lose everything that makes you who you are as a design professional. Even when you move up in the organization and influence, the last thing you should do is move away from from the unique qualities of design.
That's such an interesting point of view. I love that. But like, let's unpack that a little bit more. Like design and leadership. Like what is an example of bringing that design into a leadership role? Like I'm sure you have plenty. Like, can you give a good example?
One of the things that you can do in a boardroom meeting is instead of opening your laptop and making meeting notes or looking at a spreadsheet, grab a marker and walk to the flip chart and start drawing. Start visualizing complexity, right? People will be amazed at the value visual thinking can bring, especially at those levels. Showing empathy, using your research qualities to deeply understand the agenda of the person who's sitting next to you. We can go on. We can talk about prototyping. Can you bring a prototype to your board meeting?
And what about if you're a little bit lower in the organization? Because like visual diagramming in a board meeting sounds lovely, but in practice, there's a lot of meetings happening during the week where a lot of people come together in Zoom calls or Teams calls to get to some consensus or get to some decision or try to align, but there's a lot of waste in there. Like what are some of the qualities of service design you wish more managers had in those sessions?
What kind of sessions are we talking about? Just to make sure that we're aligned.
So let's pick one. Strategic opportunity. We're working on it in the initial phase of figuring out what to do. And we have some people from different teams coming together for the third time. They're not completely unfamiliar with each other. Coming together for the third time to have an hour meeting. And again, like in most corporates that I'm seeing, like a lot of those meetings don't have agendas. We just meet. We just like, let's connect again. Like, so let's assume there's not like a really good structured agenda. These meetings happen all the time, right? And then if you have a leader there, it comes from design, like what will be some examples that you are seeing that will help the team?
So in our studio, and I was still running a studio here, we had a poster, and the poster was inspired by a quote from somebody formerly at IDEO. It says, "No prototype, no meeting." So that's just the thing you can agree upon. If you don't bring something to our next session, there's no point in talking. Show me something. The other thing that you can do is to say, we don't do meetings. We just do workshops. There's no meeting. Nobody's interested in making notes. We are going to work together towards something. We're going to create instead of talk.
Only workshops. I would love to see a company adopt that. But the flip side of that is like, then people think service design might be a gimmick again, because there's been a lot of these workshops, especially before COVID happened, where a lot of smart people came into a room and under the guide of design professionals were taught to do design sprints or design thinking or these kind of like superficial exercises that got people really, really excited. And then the result was amazing, the feeling it was, and then nothing came out of those sessions. And companies are used to spend millions on these. Like when I hear workshop, I get a little bit allergic, and I know some other people as well. Sometimes they're useful, but workshop culture, aren't we past that, Marc?
Jochem, if you rather stick in doing meetings, if that works for you, like go for it. But if we come to the conclusion that those aren't effective either, this is an alternative. Not the alternative for all and everything, but it is an alternative.
Yeah, I like it a lot. And I'm not saying that we should have meetings. That is not really my style. And I think no one will agree. Meetings are useful, but only if you're intentional about why they are there and how you want to run them. So I couldn't agree more. And I hope more people are taking a workshop or no prototype or have to have a prototype rule to their meetings. If you could wave a magic wand in general, Marc, on service design, what would be the one thing that you would change right now in general? Like what would you wish for service design to change?
That's a big question, and it's a typical design question, so I like it. I will answer that in a second. I think what's good to also note about the things we just discussed, we need to make sure that we are clear on design and service design. So we talked a lot about the qualities of design in general. Design is not always service design. You can do design without doing service design. And my answer to your question relates to this. So what would I do if I had a magic wand? I would hope that more people are able to speak, understand, and hopefully also write in the design language, and that they are confident to do so.
And when you say design language, what do you mean?
So for me, design sits on the same level as understanding math or literally understanding a different language or knowing how to read and write. It's to a certain extent a skill that we all have. Some people are trained in it and are better equipped. Like just with writing, most of us can write, but not everybody is able to write a bestseller. We all can do math to a certain extent, but we're not Nobel Prize winners. I think to a certain extent, everybody is able to design, and it would be great if more people realize that, get confident, and also sort of see where their limitations are. Again, I can write a text, but I know that I'm not a professional copywriter, and it's good to understand when you need to bring one on board.
How would you start this? I mean, writing is also designing. A famous designer someday said to me, great design sometimes start with writing. How do you start?
So I think it starts at school, at primary school, teaching kids and giving them the vocabulary to solve challenges. And they're already doing it. Like, I think a lot of kids are better designers than most designers are. They're curious, they ask questions, they prototype all the time. Some kids are really good at visualizing stuff. So just honing that, keeping, not erasing that, I think that would be a very good start.
So you're saying we're unlearning how to design, actually?
For sure.
Well, why do you think that is? What are the characteristics of our society or business that
How deep do you want to go in this rabbit hole?
Oh, I have all the time if you have.
So, and again, this is a slippery slope when we get into our educational systems, but the way our educational system is built is mostly to select the people who are fit to work at a certain stage of the assembly line in a factory, right? That's the origin, but we're still sort of clinging on to that notion, and the things that are valued in our educational systems are things that were very useful in the industrial age and that have brought a lot of wealth. But when you look at the challenges that we're facing right now in our society, things are breaking down. So why are we sort of unlearning design? It's because we were learning how to work in a factory instead of solving complex, wicked challenges.
Are you teaching your own kids server design? Are you helping them to understand or keep their curiosity? Are you doing specific things?
Yeah, I don't use the word design, but I encourage them to try things out. I encourage them to visualize stuff. I encourage them to make things, for sure.
What can others learn from you? Is that something that you're passionate about, or do you accept that our school system is just unlearning a lot of that from young kids? Is that something that you're busy with, that you care about? I can imagine that it is close to your heart, but also very hard to put time against, because you can only do so much and you already have like your community.
I applaud all the people who are working on improving our educational system and getting it more aligned to what our society needs. My focus right now is really to deeply understanding who my kids are and what the things are that will make them happy in life. And my two kids are quite different in character. My daughter is creative. She's very flexible, open. My son is like he likes structure. He likes math. He's very organized. Like, they will follow different paths. That's okay. I just want to make sure that I'm guiding and helping them to become who they are already meant to be, not something else.
You come across as like very intentional about your personal growth and your resilience. Also hearing you speak about how you think about your kids, and I might be wrong, but it sounds a lot like how you think about your community as well, helping them grow and achieve what they want to do. And maybe that belief is so ingrained in you that is true. But what are some of the things that keep you motivated along your journey in doing this? I mean, you've been at it for 15 years.
Almost 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
So almost 20 years we've been going, and you probably go for another 20 to maybe beyond. So how do you keep yourself motivated when things don't go the way you want or you feel they should be?
I'm not a huge believer in motivation. Motivation comes and goes. It's unreliable. It's not somebody, like, you can hang out with motivation. You can have a drink with motivation. Discipline and curiosity, I think, are two key drivers for me. It's at moments, it's very annoying. I always want to try new things. There's always something that I want to learn, something new, whether it's in my professional context or my personal context. It drives me nuts, to be honest, Jochem. Like, it doesn't stop. I'm digging right now into the science of friendships.
Okay. Well, what does that mean?
Research around what it means to build friendships. What are the qualities of good friendships? What makes friendships last? What kills friendships? So I'm trying to understand what's been researched around that.
Oh, that's so interesting. What have you found so far? What are the things that you believe are true?
I'm scratching the surface and I haven't gone very far, but this connects to community, obviously. One of the most fascinating things I've heard so far, and it's not per se related to friendships as in such, but I'll give you the example anyway. So apparently research has been done when you're standing in front of a mountain that you need to climb and you look at it and you're like, oh boy, this is going to be tough. This is going to be challenging. You compare that situation to actually having somebody next to you who's also watching at the mountain. You're standing next to each other. Research shows that your perception of the mountain is actually smaller.
By standing next to someone else who is also...
When somebody is standing next to you, right? That simple thing. The mountain is still the mountain, but just having somebody next to you, and think about your work, right? Or think about all the other challenges that you encounter. Are you approaching them on your own? Or do you feel like there's somebody in your corner, either physically or at least mentally?
Is that also related to how you think about community? Like, yeah, I'm curious to, like, what was the thought process in your mind to ultimately end up like, yes, okay, I'm going to study the science of friendship? Like, well, what happened before that?
It's very simple. I think it's not something that I have discovered, but it has been reconfirmed by the things I see in the circle. The members who stick the longest, who find the most joy in the community, who get the most value out of it, are almost always the people who have been able to make friends the fastest inside a community. So friendships and building relationships is a key success factor.
I remember Facebook had the same, right? When you invite 10 friends or something like that in the first week of your account, you would likely to retain as a user. So they completely designed their whole business around that specific journey they had. Are you taking this to your community and designing your service for them around this insight? Or is that like, this is new, this is fresh, I'm thinking about it and it makes sense, so I'm going to do something around that? Or is this something that you're actively pursuing already?
This is something that we're actively pursuing. We're in the research phase, but at this point, there's no denying that in order to make the community more valuable, more helpful, more relevant, thinking about friendships and bringing in designing for friendships, connections, whatever you want to call it, relationships, is one of the focus areas for us for the coming year, 2 years, 3 years.
Everything in your community happens online right now. Is that correct? Or do you... No?
Sort of. Officially, yes. But there have been multiple occasions already where our circlers have met up in person. Most recently at the Service Design Conference in Helsinki. It's like, okay, who's going? 5 people are going. Here's a Discord channel where you can chat and make sure to make a selfie when you see each other. So it's coming offline as well.
Was it a deliberate decision to do everything online, or is it evolved this way, how you're approaching it? And maybe what are some of the challenges? Because building a digital community has its own challenges, especially around making a real deep human connection. What have you seen? Is it a decision you made deliberately to do it online, to be able to bring all these people together? And what are the things that you're seeing that make it easy or make it actually harder than doing it in person?
Yes, it was absolutely a deliberate design decision to go online and fully online for multiple reasons. Service design professionals in-house are scattered physically across the globe. In order to bring those people together, online is the only way to go, actually. When I speak to people who are applying to become a member and I ask them, where do you go for community right now? And they sort of sometimes come up with, I've been at meetups or I go to some networking events. And I'm like, okay, what's missing there? Why do you feel that you need a different community? Most often they say lack of depth. So the interesting thing is offline isn't better. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not it's offline or online. I think we have a model that allows to build very deep connections quickly. I wish it was even quicker, but that model is almost sort of space agnostic.
Where do you think your community members have an edge on building the experiences for their customers, for the companies they work at? Like what edge do they have being part of the circle versus the other service designers that are not part of it?
Sure. This is very easy for me to answer because this is what we ask them. We have every 6 months, we survey our members, and this is one of the questions, like, why are you here? What are you getting out of it? One of the things they say is confidence. So seeing how others do it and knowing that you're not the only one who is approaching things in a specific way grounds you. And the next time that you're in let's say a board meeting and somebody challenges you on your thinking, it's much easier to say, you can challenge my thinking on this, but I know that there are 50 other people out there who think exactly the same. And they are at Google, they are at IKEA, they are at name your company, right? They walk out with more confidence. But it's also a sense of belonging. Like you're just not feeling alone. Studies have shown that feeling alone isn't just a mental thing. It actually impacts you on a physical level. And knowing that there are people in your corner who you can approach when you have a challenge, who won't judge you, who will be there for you when things get tough. That's a good feeling to have, right?
It brings us back to your original belief, like everyone needs community. Is that what you fundamentally believe while you're doing this? Is that a fair statement?
I wish everybody would have a great community that they're part of.
Are you thinking about expanding this broader without losing the quality, or are you intentionally keeping it very exclusive to select few?
And when you say this, can you specify what you
Your
mean?
circle community specifically, because I know you have a broader community that is open, that is public, where you're engaged with all your members or people who follow you. But the circle is very exclusive. It's not for everyone. And I know a lot of people want to be part of it. Is that just because you can't serve them well on a high quality, or is it you don't want to do that? Have you ever thought of expanding the community, and then how are you thinking about that?
I see the circle as a specific configuration of a community. And this configuration works because it doesn't scale. So that will never change. If you do that, you'll end up with a community, but a different one. That might be interesting as well, but it's just inherently in the model of the circle, in the configuration. I call it a tribe of professionals. That's the configuration. Scale, you scale up to a certain level and then it stops. But what I am interested in is using the circle as a prototype and bringing this blueprint to others out there. Like I said, I think everybody deserves a community, and I wouldn't know why it would be just in-house service design professionals who want to get together and sort of talk shit about the challenges at work. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to bring the ideas and the philosophies and the processes and the system of the circle to anyone who needs it, to anyone who thinks that they want a community like this as well.
That's very generous. Before we end today, if you want to know more about this, listening to Marc, is there already a way that people could take your blueprint, or you say, hey, I don't know, I work in retail and I want to bring what you are doing to a group of retail professionals, like let's call it that. Are you ready? Is that something that you already have in place for people? Are you interested in hearing from people reaching out and say, can I use your systems? Or is that not yet something that you're comfortable with? Like, I would
love to hear from people, and if somebody out there is inspired by the circle and how it works, right now you need to reach out. The past weeks and months, and in the coming weeks and months, we've been working on a extremely extensive handbook. This is going to be public for free for everybody. We are documenting every single bit of anything around this model. This will take time before it's quote unquote complete, and I will be releasing it progressively. But right now, the best way is just to reach out to me, and then I can share what we already have, which isn't yet public.
So we'll put links in to Marc's profiles in the show notes and make sure that everyone can find you. What is the best social place where we can find you nowadays, Marc?
And the not so social place is LinkedIn. The most social place is probably email. Look up on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to get in touch.
All right, Marc, this was a fantastic wide-ranging conversation. We touched many topics, and I'm sure this is not the last time we speak. I want to thank you for being here, and you've been a phenomenal guest.
Thanks, Jochem. I hope a lot of podcasts will follow. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to The Experience Edge, brought to you by Daydo. I hope you've gained valuable insight from today's conversation. And remember, the journey to customer-centric business impact never stops, and neither should your learning. To dive deeper into the tools, strategies, and methods shared today, visit daydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. But before we leave today, be sure to subscribe to The Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, it really matters to get it out there, and join us next week for another episode. Until then, keep pushing the edge on your customer experience.